I'm here to tell you this morning that it is immediately urgent that all Congress get the information which I have in great detail, or an emergency banking crisis will imminently happen, probably in the next couple of weeks. Please get to me, get this information, have me come and speak to you directly. I have buckets of all the evidence, which I know is extremely vast and extremely litigation proof, as it has been analyzed by several senators, state representatives, various attorneys, and I've had multiple attempts made on my life. It should give you some indication of the type and amount of evidence that I have against the banksters' intentional destruction of America, and not only the banking system here, but around the world. Now, to let you know what I've been working on, which I receive numerous messages on my computer, as I am directly pushing each keystroke from both the CIA administration and other administrations, supposedly our allies, around the world, watching my analysis writing as I'm writing it. So please, get a hold of me at your earliest convenience. I graduated #1 in the world in 2005 in both economics and business. And I've had an extreme amount of experience, 20 hours a day, ever since 2005, dealing with some of the ramifications of the actions that were taken in this illegal banking collapse, which happened in 2008. Now, you don't seriously think that the banks would come to you, send a representative before Congress, and say, if I don't have money by 5 o'clock today, our entire financial system will collapse. And we're just too big to collapse. So sign us a check right on the spot right now, which our administration did. Now, did something happen on the computers that they would know whether or not that check was received before 5 o'clock? Or was that emergency a falsehood? Usually when there's that kind of urgency, either there is that kind of imminent danger, or they want you to act so fast so that you never find out and see the true facts. And you know what? I don't care which senator has what blackmail bags against them. It's not important. We don't care how many affairs you've had. Don't destroy the entire world because a couple people are illegally planning another banking crisis. Only this one will make the one that happened in 2008 look like a picnic that wasn't even important enough to get covered by the local newspaper. So please, stand with me when I say, bring me there to immediately, urgently testify to you on all the facts which I know on this situation personally. And to get a gist of this, I encourage you to get immediately these books. It's called The New Land Fraud Scheme of the 1%. You can type in createspace.com/5887026. The picture of George there crying was given to the Bush family, by the way, as a personal gift from myself, the photographer, which had an inscription on the 30-inch by 36-inch photo that was delivered to his new ranch in Texas, which is inscribed with the words from Luke 12, which say, if you stop the people from talking, you try to silence their words, the very rocks will cry out. And there's George crying. The next book, everybody's favorite, is The Bikini Shot, Banking Bailout Fraud Scheme Exposed, a sequel to the George book, which gets into more specific details on exactly the theories and manipulations used to basically bastardize the plan which took all of the homes in the George book. Now, the George book started with 20,000 homes being seized in Wisconsin, 98% from minorities, from blacks and Hispanics. Black Lives Matter is looking into the information in this book. And Scott Walker decided not to run for presidency after contacting me and asking if I would become a problem in his run for the presidency. Basically, that 20,000 homes it was taking in Wisconsin was continued on to 15 other states where the same gentleman, his name happens to be Wasserman Wogernies. Not because he married into some Wogernies family, but because he changed his name from Wasserman to Wogernies in order to avoid attention for his name. I wonder why. I wonder where else that name pops up. And the fact that he bragged personally to me that he paid the HC administration $300,000 so that his family member could be made the chair seat of the DNC, with an additional $3 million contribution he claims he made to the foundation, a foundation, that if her choice became elected as president, you'll have to ask her which one her choice is, that she would be named the new Secretary of State. Now, it seems odd that after certain email leaks, that a certain individual would be automatically the next day named an honorary chair, but that's not the subject of our debate today. I studied a certain family that was involved in the early stages of Al-Qaeda and watched live on satellite all the details unfold on the Paris Bataclan attacks. And that is also under createspace.com/6152756. Details outline explanations of end-time prophecies and some of the very bizarre things that are going to happen in the next couple months and years are located at createspace.com/6073810. And in case you were looking at the bathing suit and didn't notice, the CreateSpace number on that is /6229106. So you type in HTTP. And then your www typical heading, createspace.com / and then the numbers after it that I have given to you. Now, you don't honestly think that a banking collapse happened and the banksters came running and asking for money if they hadn't taken care of their own little nest first. Now, if Director Comey or a new designated director, if Comey happens to leave for any reason, wants to investigate this, this is going to be your largest case of insider trading in the universe, in history. Okay? These individuals began not the planning stage, but the active carrying out of getting their eggs in thousands of baskets ready in 2004. 2005, 6, 7, and even starting, some of the cases were as early as January 2004, actually, where they began seizing the properties they wanted. Who knows when they initially went to and started making loans and other obligations on properties that they wanted, began talking to various individuals to handle the payoffs, corruption, and illegal paperwork that would need to be processed regarding each seizure. Yes, seizure, just like the ones we've been hearing about. Because these were not takings. They were not eminent domain. They were not legal foreclosures. A good percentage of them never saw the inside of a courthouse. How can you say? Well, I'll tell you the story of one such incident. I was approached as a single handicapped Hispanic mother and 2 children on a tiny little 10-acre postage stamp farm in Wisconsin. Now, a number of individuals went to great lengths to seize letters that were supposed to be mailed to me talking about eminent domains. Those were taken. Those were used by certain individuals to do insider trading, to seize properties that become landlocked by the project in order to force huge gougings upon the state and the feds. in order to basically blackmail and threaten the state and federal governments that they would not acquiesce their lands to the projects or the damages from even cheap ones they bought to take advantage of damages by being landlocked. So a lot of illegal things happen just in the paperwork and planning stages. Then the individuals came to me. They made a settlement for some of the acres, which were at 10 cents on the dollar of the previous valuation before any of this happened, and about 1 cent on the dollar of the valuation and assessors and appraisals that were made the day after the takings. Okay, so this is fraud. This is theft. This is at a far greater percentage destruction and theft being perpetrated on the American people, far more than what happened in the paying of lands for Indian reservations. Because at least the offers that were made to them were close to the value. 10 cents on the dollar, 1 cent on the dollar. I had a man who called me, wrote me, showed up and walked all over my property, refused to leave numerous times, threatened me, entered my house without my permission, refused to leave, screamed at me, threatened at me, and everything in front of 2 small children, whether I was in the house or the barn or standing in the shower with nothing on. And then would throw empty boxes of magazine clippings on my floor and say that he had made an offer for my property and was legally serving me. Now, the individual that did that ended up being the judge's a very famous judge's son, who was drunk on drugs and basically was being coerced by a fellow attorney in order to break into my house. I observed him taking both of my little girl and my little boy and knocking them down, throwing them out the door, grabbing them by the arms and tossing them across the lawn and other such actions. I'm standing in the shower, clutching at a towel, on the phone to 911 because I have a phone next to my shower, and the man refused to get out of my bathroom. When the police captured him fleeing the neighborhood and fully intoxicated drugs and alcohol at the end of our street, I had newspaper people, not that any newspaper people are at all influenced by the government to any of their rhetoric, but they came to my house and asked and demanded and otherwise coerced that I had to accept from the man that he would write this wonderful letter of apology to me for everything that he had done, and that they would take this offer from me, which was not an offer, I was forced to agree to this, and nothing was done in writing. I was never able to see any letter or be informed of court hearings about what happened. And when I finally got the letter a year after he'd been forgiven, I got a type note that said, "I'm sorry I upset your family." That's it. No heading, no personal sign, date, name, anything. Just this very, very scam of a letter. At any rate, I continued with various negotiations and meetings with the state on the eminent domain seizure of half of the acres of my property. And what I was promised is that for not suing the state and the federal for their severe, huge underpayment, illegal actions, which caused me not to know about it for a great amount of time, and they did a whole number of illegal acts against me, try to force me into these meetings. Their bean counters basically admitted that they had caused $100,000 damage to my little farm. Now, this farm was not worth half of that when I first had bought it, and we had worked 22 hours a day, 6 days a week for years, putting every penny that we could into it. We brought in $1 million worth of revenue a year to the town, and this is the thanks that we got repaid for helping everybody and anyone. All of the money that I, my husband, and my family made in other states and or other countries, we all brought in and only made purchases or transactions in that state, in that city, in that town to benefit the people that were our friends and neighbors. And we felt that this is a good neighborly thing that people should do. Maybe not 100% of it like we did, but a good chunk of it should go to where you live. Pay attention, corporations that are in other countries, or say they are, with a P.O. box address in order to evade taxes. However, back to our story, after this agreement was reached, that I would get 10 cents on the dollar of what the property was worth at the time, that I would not sue the state or the federal for additional monies, and I was given with that the golden promise, supposed to be grandfathered in, that nobody would ever again come against my property. This, my friends, did not happen. We went to an event one day, and when we came home, a dozen 50-foot tall, 150-year-old pine trees were literally ripped out by the roots. Ditches were dug all across our front yard. My whole driveway, concrete driveway, giant commercial cul-de-sac under the driveway was ripped to smithereens, and we were left with this giant pit that ran the whole length of the property. We couldn't even get our vehicle, and me with a young infant, into our house, into our property to park, to get off the street, to be able to walk back and forth under severe medical conditions and a new infant and a little toddler to get to our own house. So we met with the city, and we'll get into that under another story, but we paid the money that we had received in eminent domain, $55,000 of money from eminent domain, to pay for the pipe that ripped up our yard, again, with promises, recorded, newspaper reporters there and waiting, other people waiting as witnesses there, heads of other nearby towns, heads of towns very far away, to make sure that we were given someone who would keep their word and keep the agreement that they had with us to, again, the agreement was given to us. We will never again come against you. I had some gentlemen shortly later which entered into my home and said that they wanted to give me a loan because I had been such a wonderful, nice person to not sue the state or the federal for the taking of my farm. So I should just go out, find another farm so that I could go back to my same amount of acres and be able to do what my intention with my farm was, to be able to provide for my own family, to have crops to feed animals so that I don't have to purchase high dollar feeds and such, and my children could have the enjoyment and the wholesome lifestyle of raising their own fruits and vegetables and their own animals, and we had to have sufficient enough acres to grow the feed that they would require. So we did. We got the farm that they approved, that they wanted. It was about $225,000. And as soon as we closed the escrow, we also agreed that the old people that had the farm could stay on it for a year. So they would have time, being that they're 10 or 15 years older than I am, to go through all their belongings. You gather a lot of clutter in 27 years, that they could have time to go through and do that at their leisure. Well, instead they repaid us by stealing every single doorknob and shelf and anything that could be removed, including the entire inside of a hand-carved 100-year-old workshop with tiny little drawers 10 feet tall on our 4 walls, and the vices and tables and everything else that went with that. They stole everything. And then they took a dozen giant refrigerator freezers, commercial size, and they drilled them to the walls with 12-inch spikes to tell us thank you for giving them a year of rent for free. And then they stole all the machinery that was included in the farm. So now we're stuck on a second farm that overnight has lost $100,000 in value because all of the walls and doors and shelves and even machinery and anything else that was built onto the property was stolen, was taken. Now we're really in a pickle. Then the bank comes to us and demands that although I had paid off my loans on our property, on our first property, that I needed to take out a $75,000 equity loan, and they would tell me how to spend it. So I was forced to do some new irrigation, new driveway, and a new roof on the second structure, which is 3-bedroom residence, grandfathered in, workshop, 3-car garage, shower and laundry facilities, and the house. Everything had to be re-roofed by this money that they forced me to take out as a loan, under the threat that they would take the old farm and the new farm if I didn't do this. That they would say the value had gone down, and then they could instantly seize the property without any legal recourse, without any day in court. We did everything that we said, and we left to go to another state over the holidays, and no sooner had we arrived when the phone was ringing, and this little old lady was on the phone, and she said, I just read in the newspaper where your house is going to be seized just a couple of days before Christmas. We would have arrived back on Christmas Eve thinking we were going to have this awesome holiday together with our family, and find that all of our belongings were disappeared and our house was stolen. So we started researching what had happened on this. And this is how the bank got away with everything. In early 2000, they went to several banks and several individuals in every single town in Wisconsin, and they said, this is what we're going to do. You as the bank are going to find out which 5 or 10 guys are attorneys in your town. And you're going to have each one of those attorneys from basically every attorney in town hired by every local bank in town. And certainly one presided over all of the rest everywhere that was possible first. So usually their first choice, the one state bank in every single town, hired every attorney in every town just to write one letter, $200, $250, and thereby creating an artificial conflict of interest so that nobody could secure an attorney when the seizures happened. Again, I will continue to call them seizures because that's what they did, and that's what everybody did whose house was taken. Now that they've gotten the attorneys all taken care of, banks all taken care of, the individuals already lined up like little ducks in a row on who they could pay off, they went to every single home and either gave them a loan or created some need that the town could take the property, or they already had a loan which they easily purchased from whatever other bank in town. Now they have their list of properties. Now they bought properties from the portfolios of other banks if there was a jewel that they wanted. In this process, they collected 20,000 properties in Wisconsin. Now, we're not talking about poverty-stricken little lot and nobody's going to notice. A good deal of the properties that I researched were between $10 and $12.5 million, many of them up to $28, $30 million, like my farm. And one individual was a commercial property in Eau Claire, $12.5 million. And they gave him a loan for $250,000, and 60 days later they went to him and they threw him off the property and seized it. And he's like, well, why? I've only had this loan a short time, and I've made the payments, and this property is worth a ton. And they said, I'm sorry, we sent our appraiser back out to your property, and today it's not worth what it was 60 days ago. So the collateral percentage is not the same, so we're seizing your property. Now, 98% of these properties were from blacks and Hispanics, and a lot of people, like my family on one house, We went to the market for an hour, and we came home, and every piece of paper had been taken out of the property, was disappeared, gone. And there was another family in the house sitting there saying, we live here, with whatever furniture was left in there. We don't know. We didn't get to see how much they left. And they had hired about, I don't know, 20 young guys in cute little tiny bare to the grass pickup trucks and shotguns and rifles. And they were in the cabs, and they were sitting in the backs of the trucks. They were standing in the beds of the trucks, and chased us off of the land with guns. So these did not get court hearings. Back to the little lady, when we got her message that the first property was being taken, we called an attorney, and a friend of mine had just gotten a brand new credit card, and the attorney asked for to pay in full on the case exactly what this new credit card came in the mail with the balance potential of. And so he gave the numbers to the attorney and paid for the case in full. The little lady faxed to me the summons and complaint that was filed on the case that she thought, or rather the bank thought, that nobody would ever find. And I, working for an attorney, prepared the answers to the summons and complaint, 30-some questions. We ran back to the farm. We got there in time for the court hearing, and what we discovered was that he had not filed the answers that we had typed and emailed and sent to him. He literally had to only put his name and address and phone number at the top to secure the fee that he was paid. And instead, he turned in a letter with one sentence on it, saying she wants to be judged against. She doesn't want any type of mitigation. She doesn't want any conferences. She wants this to happen as soon as possible. She wants the judgment against her. She wants to pay for all of the attorneys and all of the court costs. And the line was blank. So he basically wanted a blank check on top of the property being seized. Now, you'll have to go through the book for all the other details because there's far too much explained right here, unless you have me come in person. But know this, they started their plan to list the properties they wanted, the people that were going to participate in the scam, and the banks and attorneys that would help fulfill it back in 2000. They were already taking all of the properties that they wanted and even having them in court by January of 2004. A good portion of these never went to court. You got a family, a wife, a kids, sitting on a couch under a bridge. What kind of paperwork or receipts or sitting down to type in the library are they going to do when they have nowhere to sleep that night, no food, no anything? They're crying, they're confused, they feel helpless. And remember, these people were picked because of a great portion of them not having a formal education, or maybe had gotten their properties initially by paying all the money they had saved for that one time down. They didn't have unlimited funds to have attorneys fight them. And even if they did, all the attorneys, even the ones that wanted to help, the few good ones that wanted to help, were conflict of interest out of the case. Because, if you remember, they had been suckered into writing one letter for $200 for this gentleman and his cronies. You know, do you want to buy your property? We're going to evict you. You have a late payment due. Whatever it was, they wrote a letter, and now the good guys are all conflicted out. The bad guys have all been paid. All the attorneys who didn't even do anything got at least $50,000. And the attorney who acted against us by turning in one sentence saying, we don't want this to go to court, just judge as fast as you can and make a judgment of money against her on top of that for as much as you want to. That's what his little 1 or 2 sentence thing said that he filed with the court. He never filed the answers to summons and complaint that we already wrote out and provided for him. Now, he stood there in court and admitted to the judge and to the board for all the attorney reviews that he had accepted $350,000 in bribes to do this to us, and a written promise that the bank on the opposing side of his next 10 cases would allow him to win. So he was going to collect the fees of the winning attorney on the next 10 cases he had against the same bank, and then forevermore, then he works for them, and so on. The $350,000 he admitted in taking to throw our case and intentionally have us thrown off of our farm. One of the other farms that I had taken from me, they put half of the legal description's first sentence on an announcement in a newspaper, ordered on Friday, placed on Saturday. I found out by accident by talking to the newspaper lady, by God's will, that same Friday afternoon. So I was able to go down to the courthouse on Monday and file answers to my own summons and complaint. I had professional servers served to every single person, the bank, the attorney, this bank address, that bank address, this man involved, that man involved. We served everybody and the courthouses and everything else on Monday, and on Wednesday, somebody else was living in our home. We got no court hearing. Now, we get to the fraudulent banking collapse part. Guess what? They created the bubble to make the property values rise after they had secured all the properties that they wanted. 20,000 properties in the first state, Wisconsin alone. And yes, Scott Walker knows about this, and that's why he announced his running and then announced his taking out 2 weeks later, because he had already accepted $3 million from the Koch brothers when he spoke to me 2 weeks before he announced that he was going to run. So the announcement was only the CYA, the illegal campaign contributions. He had to, because he had accepted the money, make the announcement to run and then pull out 2 weeks afterward. But besides that, these people now have 20,000 properties in their pocket they want and thousands more that they don't want. So they play the numbers and they play the markets with those to increase the values of the properties. Now, a lot of these properties were in their 25th year of the mortgage, almost ready to be paid off. The value is 10 times more than when the poor little farmer families first bought them 25 years earlier. So you get the incredible amount of value that they stole with every single commercial and farm and private property that they took. So they have 90% of the value on each property and this tiny little residue of mortgage, right? So they take a couple thousand extra properties, they manipulate the market, and they drive the values up crazy. Then, true to insider form, they dump the shit. They dump the shit on everything to pop the bubble, to make the bubble collapse. Why? So that they can manipulate the values again. So they've now taken all these properties. They've gotten paid off by the government. Then the values go tank, bottom. They have all this money laying around, and they buy more properties. And Mr. Wogernes bragged that on the homes that he stole and sold from Wisconsin alone with this little scheme, he made $600 million. $600 million in one state alone. Now he figures this is just a bunch of okey-doke farmers, and a lot of them were elderly and did not have expertise in the legal area. And the rest of them were conflicted out from getting a single attorney in the state. We called thousands of attorneys, and in every town we got told the same story. We met with Van Hollen, the Attorney General of the state, and he said, "I'm so sorry, this is the worst case of mortgage abuse I've ever heard. But I graduated law school with one guy, and the other guy I play golf with every Friday. So you just got to go to some other state and find like a Wisconsin attorney that decided to move to Virginia or Timbuktu or somewhere and still maintains their Wisconsin address and bar and wants to travel back all the expense of days and days of, the process for both the court and the discovery processes. And they've seized all of your money, all of your investment and saving and retirement accounts and your properties. They've taken every penny from you, which means that attorney would either have to go pro bono or contingency. So, and find them still having their Wisconsin license active and wanting to front all the expenses of going back and forth. Not going to happen. Couldn't find anybody that would do that. Not for us, not for anybody else. We did take this through all the way to the Supreme Court in Wisconsin. And there were some individuals in the Supreme Court which saw what was going on and recused themselves and said, we don't want to have anything to do with this. This is just horrendous that you have stolen all of the money, investment accounts, retirement account, everything. Every penny was gone. And here I am, handicapped, because here's the best part of it. The guy that stole my property has a friend who lives next door to a senator that I dated years ago. And they cooked up this little plan to run me over in a store with a forklift to put me out of commission to make me easier to deal with so that I wouldn't cry or be able to go and talk to attorneys. I would physically, mentally, or emotionally not have anything left to proceed against them in court. These people jumped in our windows with guns, chased us on our property with guns, had officers break into our back door, and this is on a recorded 911 call. He paid the officer $75,000 to break down our door and shoot me and my daughter and kill us and say that we had weapons and were holding each other hostages and all this other crap. So yeah, Wilgernese then calls me up, or Wasserman, or whatever his name is now, and tells me that he has spent now a total of $7.75 million to hide everything that he's done to me. The attempts on my life, we won't get into how many times of that, and everything, in order to hide what he's done. Now, the reason why is that after he made the $600 million in the first state, he took his plan and did it in 15 other states. 100,000 homes per state this time, folks. And guess what? If you don't care about this and you think it doesn't affect you, he has plans right now to go into the 35 remaining states and take 100,000 homes per state. And he's got his scam so refined from all this practice in all these states that maybe, even if you're not black or Mexican, he's going to take a liking to something you own. Maybe your private home, maybe your business place. So keep in mind, they bought these places, they drove the values up, they drove the values down when they wanted to, and then they came to you one day at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and said, if we don't have a check by 5 o'clock, the banks are going to fail. Well, they don't fail that fast. They fail with lots of insider planning. So, guess what you guys did? They wrote down on paper that they bought these houses at huge amounts. And since the mortgagors were now in default, because the values got changed by their appraisers 2 months later, then they took the properties and sold them, as I said, without legal recourse, without lawsuits, without any kind of a legal process or trial. Certainly this conflict of interest manipulation of the law has got to be highly illegal, as it shows intent of fraud. So then they take these properties and they send them all to auction. There's only one problem. They didn't even tell anybody about the auction. You put half of one sentence of a legal description in on Saturday morning, and you take the properties on Wednesday, and you don't tell anybody what does that half a sentence legal description mean? Nobody knows where the property is, what it is, how much it's worth, or anything. And so only 5 people show up at the auction. And if a 6th person happens to get wind or smart of this and wants to get a bargain and they show up, God forbid, if they think that you're going to make a bid on that property, the head sheriff walks out and he just cancels the whole darn auction. And then a couple weeks later, new paper, new deeds magically appeared saying that there were auctions. And oh my God, nobody bid on this one, $28 million. So we took it back to ourselves for $25,000. And that's the example of what they did. And even if they were bid, okay, I had items that were $15,000 to $25,000 a piece. They did make one auction of personal property in my case. And we were on a missionary trip to Peru. And then we landed on the West Coast and hadn't driven back to the Wisconsin farm. And we get this call saying tomorrow morning there's going to be this auction. So we couldn't get there in time. And only a couple of their friends were invited to attend. They had guns and trucks and things keeping anyone else away. And they took things that were worth $15,000 to $25,000 a piece and sold them to themselves or their couple friends for between, most things went for $1 a piece. I think there was a couple of like an $80,000 truck that they sold for $3,000 and a designer collector's car that was worth about $100,000. I think they sold that to themselves for about $1,500. And that's it. That's it. So then you sell it to your friend or yourself for $1. And that's when you run to Congress. And you say, oh my God, we had this loan. And it was $275,000. And we sold it and all we got was $10,000. So you, Congress, my friend, gave them the $265,000 or the $28 million difference on every single property. They illegally got the properties. They forced people to take loans. They took the properties back. They got everything in the end for 1 penny on the dollar. And that's the recent properties. The ones that have been owned by families and businesses and farms for 25, 28 years, the screw level goes severely up. Okay? Mine, I know that the funds that they took and got paid for on mine, they paid about a penny on the dollar. And they have kept the ones that they want. They have exchanged their assets into other properties, other gold, other assets, other companies, other countries, owning the assets of other countries, owning mansions and artifacts, currencies, everything in other countries. Most of it hard items. Because guess what? That was just a practice test. And they're going to do it again. And they're going to do it every day. And by you bailing them out 99 cents on the dollar after they did all this, if you count all the ways of when they took it and when they sold it and what they got paid off for and when they auctioned it back to themselves and then they turned around and sold it at the current, balloon pop low now price, take a look at that. And they have actually earned the full amount of each property, not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times. Yes, you're right. They have ended up making what the value is on each and every property 5 times. And my great-grandkids should have to pay it off by not having a job, an education, medical, not even a house. Most of these people are living on the streets now, the ones that didn't commit suicide. These people are responsible for millions of not just lives and families, but souls. Now, don't go rushing out and break up the big banks just yet. Not just yet. Because that's exactly what they want. As soon as you break up the big banks, guess what you've done? You've changed the name. You can no longer sue, we'll say, Bank of Swaziland, because guess what? It now doesn't exist. Because you allowed them to have their attorney file a paper that now says their new name is Bank of Mary and James Land. So how are you going to file a lawsuit against Swaziland Maryland if the name is now Mary and James Land? They want you to break them up so that the evidence is burned and wiped. And no, not on a server, not with a cloth. And you can't get them. Well, you know what? Those bank balances and those homes in other countries and those assets and countries and companies that they now control and own, seize those. Divvy them up, give them back to all of the American people, tank the banks back, and let the governments own the banks and the prisons. Our assets and our punishment should not be owned by private countries. When our assets are owned by corporations, they make the profits, they steal them, they hide them, and they're getting 5 times what each property was worth, and we're paying the bill because you paid them the difference. Because they sold a property for themselves for a penny when it was worth $1, and so you gave them the 99-cent difference after they'd already made money on it several different ways. So please get the books, all right? We have the new land fraud scheme of the 1%. That's on createspace.com/5887026. The banking bailout fraud scheme exposed, as the bathing suit shows you. Same. createspace.com/6229106. You want to find out what the intentions are, what's going to happen in the end game with the terrorists. You want to know who created them? You want to know how much they're getting paid? You want to know what their end agenda is? /6152756 terrorist massacre at Paris, Bataclan, and sociology of a terror cell. And don't forget the Revelations commentary. Lots of stuff happening in there right now. And if you look to the 3rd seal, it's going to happen in just a very, very short time here, my friends. You may not have time for the book to arrive. And that is under createspace.com/6073810. And if you care to donate to me for the 38 properties which I lost as a whistleblower in order to tell you this tale, I'd appreciate some help from Black Lives Matter or senators or Congress. I'd love to be able to come and talk in Congress and show you what happened. I have documents. I have whole buckets full of documents where I can prove 100 allegations of fraud on one property alone. So thank you very much. I can also be reached at PayPal/BuffaloStudy@yahoo.com or the same email, BuffaloStudy@yahoo.com. Thank you. God bless. And remember, don't ignore this because you're busy doing fundraisers or other things. They're having you do that to keep your eyes busy so you don't see these things. And we don't care. We don't care if you've had 100 marital affairs. We need your help. We need you to stand up. We need you to be men. So stop taking the drugs and the contaminated water and the clear water bottles that are contaminated with things. These things are all made to take away the testosterone of an entire population. We need some men and we need them to stand up. Okay? We don't need some women to stand up and go, oh my God, I'm so excited that I'm now in power. Because we see this happening over and over again in every country in the world. We need some men to stand up right now and to take over these companies. Don't break them up. First, you take them over. You get back the assets. You get back the money. You put them in prison. Then you break them up. Then you put banks under, make each state be control of its own bank. Don't let it be such a huge monopoly next time. Don't you dare break it up until we get those boys in prison and we get our monies back. Everybody certainly deserves the minimum of getting their own home back. You can be bribed or you can be blackmailed. But in the end, only you can stand before God and say what you did and what decisions you made. And it doesn't matter that the beast and the false prophet show up or the end of the world happens next week. We're asking you to do something this week that maybe if you give the people faith back in their government and in their country, they'll get their faith back in God. And by doing this and acting on this, you could be saving thousands of souls for heaven. So make God happy and be able to live with yourself. Thank you so much. Reach me, please. 307-250-0024. I have all the facts. I have all the evidence. You can call the FBI. I've done 18 major cases for them all on my own. Collected all the evidence, wrote the cases, did all the testifying, put myself and my family's life in danger numerous times to do the right thing. Certainly you can too. Please don't let us down. Please don't let your family down. Don't let yourself down. And most of all, don't let God down. Okay? We're praying for you. Stand up and do the right thing. Thank you so much.